The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub. Today we're going to examine yet another terrible situation. While attending Quincy University, Becky and Tim Blithnick got to know one another. Tim established himself as an all-star football player, while Becky played tennis and worked toward a degree in biology. Tim was a cheerful, silly guy who always greeted everyone with an embrace, according to those who knew him well. He was well-liked by his peers because of his contagious enthusiasm and kind disposition. However, according to Becky's acquaintances, she was a cheerful individual who brightened any space simply by being there. She was immediately approachable due to her beautiful smile and wonderful spirit. Tim and Becky appear to be a wonderful match because they were both lovely individuals. They appeared to be the perfect couple because of their physical attributes and chemistry. Becky and Tim made the decision to start a new chapter in their lives by getting married 2 years after they graduated from Quincy University. They were a frugal pair who valued saving money over frivolous spending. Tim did not arrange an extravagant honeymoon after their wedding, nor did he purchase Becky an engagement ring. They chose to use their funds as a down payment for their first house instead. A profession as a doctor was one of Becky's life goals. But in the end, she chose not to pursue this line of work. Despite her sincere interest in medicine, Becky felt a great desire to become a mother. She wanted to feel the happiness and contentment that comes with motherhood. She and her husband, Tim, have 3 sons, fulfilling her lifelong desire of becoming a mother. Becky's greatest happiness was being a mother, and she loved nothing more than raising her 3 boys. Becky enjoyed spending time with them and seeing how they developed and flourished. Becky made the decision to follow her goals and dreams as the boys grew older. She made the decision to return to school and earn a degree in nursing. A performer, Tim Blithnick had always been. From his time in Quincy's community theater to his amusing social media posts, Tim had a talent for enthralling audiences with his charm and humor. He made the bold decision to try out for American Gladiators in 2008. He made it to the last round of auditions. However, he was not selected to appear on the show. Tim, who had an unquenchable thirst for attention, had another chance to show off his skills. He received a message from Family Feud's producers in September 2019, encouraging him and his family to take part in the well-liked game program. But Becky couldn't join him on the show because of her nursing school obligations. Tim rallied his family, including his siblings and dad, determined to take full use of the chance. The idea behind Family Feud is that 2 groups of friends or family members compete against one another by speculating on the responses to a survey that is given to 100 people. The host of the well-known game program Family Feud, Steve Harvey, asked Tim Blithnick what he believed to be the most well-liked response to the query. "What was the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?" Steve Harvey and the audience were taken aback by Tim's remark, which was characteristic of his clever comedy. "I do, but I love you, honey," Tim retorted. Everyone was taken aback by this revelation, and the studio erupted in laughter. Even though the response was unexpected, Tim and his family still gained points because it came in second on the scoreboard. After that, the Blithnick family appeared on Family Feud for 3 episodes and won a total of $20,000. Every member of the household received an equal portion of this sum. There was one noteworthy exception, though. Becky, Tim's wife, did not get any of the winnings. Tim and Becky had been married for years, but their relationship had started to deteriorate. Tim, Becky's husband, took a firm stance against her choosing to become a nurse. Tim claimed that his main worry was Becky's health because he was concerned about the strain that comes with being a nurse. He thought that when it came to their kids, Becky struggled to control her stress and patience, and he questioned how this might impact her performance at work. But Becky's friends saw Tim's resistance in a different light. They thought that Becky's independence and pursuit of her interests outside of his supervision bothered Tim. As time went on, Becky's acquaintances noticed that her marriage and happiness were deteriorating. They saw that while the first 5 years of her marriage were generally good, Tim started acting more controlling and manipulatively. Tim neglected his due part of household duties, according to Becky's friends, even while Becky devoted a significant amount of time and energy to her nursing education and career. Tim did not assist in taking care of their sons or clean. After Becky's long days of standing on her feet as a nurse, he left everything for her to handle. Realizing that their marriage was under stress, Becky felt compelled to talk to Tim about it. She thought that going to marital counseling would assist them in resolving their differences and bringing their relationship back into harmony. She was disappointed to learn that Tim opposed going to counseling. Becky was committed to fixing their marital problems, but Tim had other ideas. After 11 years of marriage, Tim and Becky filed for divorce in January 2021. Becky was taken aback by this choice because she had demonstrated tenacity and dedication in attempting to keep their marriage intact. But Tim's choice was obvious because he left the family home and moved into a residence on the other side of town. Tim claimed that Becky's personality changed after she became a nurse, which is why he made the decision. He thought her line of work had worn her down, and that was why she had changed so obviously. Tim claims that their marriage suffered as a result of Becky's personality shift. Tim and Becky's divorce was a difficult one. Communication between Tim and Becky deteriorated as they were unable to establish common ground. A number of problems, such as alimony, property distribution, and child custody, caused arguments between the two parties. Tim eventually requested an order of protection from Becky. Tim claimed that Becky had been harassing and stalking him in this request, citing an instance in which Becky lost her temper during a verbal altercation at a parent-teacher conference held at their son's school. Tim presented a video he had taken on his phone showing Becky beating on the door of his car outside the school as proof. But Becky's view of the matter was different. She said that the harassment was being perpetrated by Tim. Becky texted a number of her pals to let them know about her worries. She described several instances in these letters where Tim had pushed her in front of their sons, yelled in her face, and even threw objects across the room. In a particularly upsetting text message to one acquaintance, Becky stated that she thought Tim was getting more vindictive and erratic, and that she thought he had major mental health issues. Becky started to worry more and more about her safety after her partner killed one of her co-workers. She started to think that her lover, Tim, could do the same to her. Therefore, Becky texted her sister to let her know that Tim would be the first person of interest if anything were to happen to her. Becky's fears that Tim would take extreme steps to keep her away from her kids were the main source of her worries. Becky's sister was extremely worried about Becky's welfare after receiving the text message. She was aware that Becky needed help and that her worries were legitimate. Becky's sister pleaded with her to go to a domestic abuse resource center in order to save her life. In the end, Becky made the decision to request Tim's protection. According to Becky's request, Tim had lied about their encounters and broken into her house without authorization. After examining Tim and Becky's protection orders, the judge decided not to award either of them. With the exception of exchanging child custody, the judge ordered Tim and Becky to avoid each other's houses. But Tim told the Quincy Police Department over the phone in February 2023 that he would not be giving the gun back to Becky. "I didn't want to give the gun to that crazy bitch," Tim said. Tim's house was a mile away from Becky's residence, and on February 22, 2023, Becky and Tim's 3 sons, ages 10, 5, and 12, were staying overnight at his house. Becky and Tim's divorce was scheduled to be finalized within a week. The next day, Tim contacted Becky's father and informed him that Becky had not been able to contact him and that she had not picked up the boys from school as scheduled. Given how committed Becky was to being a mother, Her father was aware that something had to have happened to keep her from carrying out her parenting duties. Becky's father quickly drove to her home out of concern for her welfare. He yelled Becky's name as he entered and started to move around. When he got no answer, he climbed the stairs and went into Becky's bedroom. He saw something unsettling inside the room. Covered in gunshot wounds, Becky lay face up in a pool of blood. When Becky's father found her dead and bleeding body in the bathtub, face up, detectives and crime scene investigators came to her home. The detectives started their inquiry by closely inspecting Becky's house's exterior as they arrived. Following a comprehensive search, they discovered that the suspected criminal entered one of the children's beds by forcing open an upstairs window. Because of this discovery, they think the suspect used a patio chair to make it easier for them to enter the house and ascend to the roof. The suspect's suspected route was traced by investigators. They made their way over to Becky's bedroom, where the door looked like it had been shattered or kicked down severely. The fact that the bedroom door was shattered told the authorities that the suspect had broken in and probably was looking for Becky. According to the evidence, the guy had followed Becky and caught up to her after she had tried to barricade herself in the restroom. But after pursuing her and catching up to her, the suspect shot her inside the restroom. Becky's cell phone was discovered by the detectives while they searched the toilet where her body was discovered. They checked Becky's phone and found that she had called 9-1-1-2-6 at 1 to 11 a.m. The investigators developed a notion regarding what had transpired that evening as a result of this discovery. They thought she made a frantic attempt to contact for assistance as the suspect was pursuing her through the house, but she accidentally dialed the incorrect number. Detectives believed the guy knocked the phone out of Becky's hand before she could attempt to contact 911 again. Investigators thought that Becky was probably killed around 1 to 11 a.m. because that is when the misdialed call happened. Officers searched Becky's area, but nobody remembered hearing any noises at that time. Since Becky had been shot several times, it was improbable that no one had heard anything. Thus, the investigators were suspicious of the lack of witnesses. After conducting a comprehensive investigation of Becky's home, investigators soon realized that nothing was taken, indicating that her death was not the consequence of a poorly executed break-in. Even though there were no stolen goods found, the criminal left behind a substantial amount of evidence. A partial shoe print found close to the location where the suspect entered the building was one noteworthy finding. The suspect's shoe print may reveal information about the size and shape of their feet, as well as the brand and model of the shoes they were wearing. Additionally, 8 9mm round casings were discovered at the scene by the investigators. The investigators also found little fragments of torn plastic strewn all over the floor next to Becky's body. The investigators were unsure on how to interpret their findings after gathering all of this evidence. They therefore made the decision to transfer the gathered evidence to forensic labs for examination. If any of Becky's neighbors have security cameras outside their houses, detectives wanted to know. After their car was broken into a year prior, one neighbor in particular had a camera mounted on the side of their house. The neighbor's driveway, which was adjacent to Becky's house, was the target of this camera. Every time movement was detected, the camera would activate and notify the neighbors. Sadly, the camera was unable to capture anything noteworthy on the night of Becky's passing. But after some research, it was discovered that the camera had caught an oddity the day before. The camera saw someone strolling down the driveway toward the back of Becky's house around 1:05 a.m. on the day before she was killed. The same person was seen walking in the opposite direction around 48 minutes later. A week or so prior, on February 14th, a similar incident was seen on Becky's neighbor's camera. On Valentine's Day, Becky's neighbors quickly alerted her after spotting a dark-clad man prowling about her home on their security camera footage. The neighbors claimed that after they told Becky about the enigmatic person, she started to get paranoid. The night before, Becky heard voices in her backyard, which alarmed her, even though she assured her neighbors she didn't see anyone on her property. Officers looked through the remainder of the area for further footage of this enigmatic, dark-clad individual after seeing it on Becky's neighbor's security camera. In the Quincy bus barn, officers discovered videos from a residence that showed a person riding a bike approaching Becky's house while wearing dark clothing. In line with the description of the enigmatic individual seen in the driveway clip, these videos featured a person riding a bike while wearing black attire. Detectives started to assume that the individual on the bike was the same person seen in the video taken from Becky's driveway after examining the times of the recordings. Officers discovered footage showing a person riding a bike in the vicinity of Becky's house just before and after the murder, despite the fact that Becky's neighbor's security camera did not record any evidence of the unidentified individual on the night of her death. The individual in this video fit the description of the person who was observed in Becky's driveway and in the days before her murder. Despite the fact that the video evidence was useful in the investigation of Becky's murder, the low quality of the clip prevented it from offering much information. Because the footage was blurry and made it difficult to tell if the subject of the video was male or female, the investigators were unable to identify the individual. The bike the person was riding, however, was one feature of the film that caught the detectives' attention. They saw that the wheels didn't seem to have reflectors. The only person that immediately sprung to mind as a suspect when Becky's sister learned that she had been murdered was her estranged husband, Tim Bliefnick. This information was provided to the investigators working on Becky's case by her sister, who had first-hand knowledge of the acrimonious divorce between Becky and Tim. The cops started to suspect Tim in Becky's murder after learning this information. Given that Becky was murdered just 1 week before they were set to finalize their divorce, the timing was very important. A bike without reflectors on its wheels was discovered by authorities as they continued their investigation into Becky's death. This cycle resembled the one shown on security camera footage taken just a block from Tim Bliefnick's residence. The investigators obtained a search warrant for Tim's home as a result of this revelation, which increased their level of suspicion. Tim complied with and showed respect for the officers while they carried out the search warrant. Together with the authorities, he voluntarily stood outside his house while investigators searched his possessions. Tim was taken into custody and accused with Becky's murder on March 13, 2023, 2 weeks after her death. Becky's relatives and friends were stunned by Tim's looks when his mugshot was made public following his arrest. The crisp-cut man they had known was nothing like the one they saw in the mugshot. Rather, they observed a rumpled, untidy individual who seemed to be in poor physical shape. Tim's appearance seemed to many to be a reflection of the impact the divorce had on him. His once tidy appearance had deteriorated, his clothes and hair disheveled. Family members and friends conjectured that his physical and mental health had suffered as a result of the divorce. Tim, though, provided a different explanation for his altered look. "I'm growing my hair out for charity," he said. Tim explained that he was taking part in a campaign to raise awareness about cancer research. The video became viral due to Tim's appearance on Family Feud and his strange statement that he wished he had never married his wife after being imprisoned for her murder. Tim's comment was perceived by many as a chilling premonition of what was to happen. They contended that Tim's strange Family Feud response was a chilling sign of his actual motivations and emotions for his wife. Some even described it as an indication that a dark secret was developing in their relationship. After closely examining Tim's phone, the investigators found that he had set up a Facebook account using the name John Smith. The police discovered throughout their inquiry that Tim was looking for a bicycle on Facebook and came across a blue Schwinn with no lights on the wheels. This was an interesting find because it fit the description of a bike that was discovered abandoned a block from Tim's house. The detectives faced a major obstacle in spite of the compelling evidence against Tim. Tim exercised his right to a speedy trial despite being detained without bond at the time of his arrest. Prosecutors had to try the case within 90 days of Tim's arrest in order to exercise this authority. Because there was neither a confession nor any DNA evidence, the prosecution had a difficult time proving to the jury that Tim killed Becky. In criminal trials, Juries usually search for these two essential components. The state in this instance lacked both. The prosecution faced a difficult task in trying to bring Tim to justice for the death of his wife. Tim Blyfinick was put on trial on May 23, 2023, precisely 3 months after Becky Blyfinick was tragically murdered in her home. The state provided the prosecution with evidence that investigators had retrieved from the crime site during Tim's trial. The shredded plastic fragments discovered on the floor near Becky's body were one of the pieces of evidence that were addressed. According to the prosecution, the pieces of shredded plastic were taken from an Aldi supermarket bag. Stacks of similar bags were later discovered during a search of Tim's home, the prosecution also told the jurors. The prosecutor claims that Tim shot his estranged wife multiple times while using the plastic bags as a silencer. According to their argument, Tim used the bags to mute the gunfire so that no one else could hear it. Tim allegedly left DNA on these Aldi bags, according to the prosecution. Tim was very likely the DNA contributor, according to an expert they called to testify. Additionally, this expert stated in court that the DNA discovered beneath Becky's fingernails could not be separated from Tim's DNA. The jury was shown evidence by the prosecutors that suggested the victim's window may have been forced open on the night of her murder using a crowbar that was discovered in Tim's basement. Even though the crowbar and the pry marks had microscopic similarities, an expert testified that she was unable to confirm that the crowbar in Tim's cellar had been used. The prosecution used a number of Tim's phone searches, including one, to bolster their case. How to use a crowbar 2 to open my door. How to build a homemade silencer for a handgun 3. How to wash your hands of gunpowder 4. Quincy police response time averaged. The prosecution called an expert to testify that she compared the shell casings from the crime scene to those investigators found during Tim's home search and concluded that 27 of the casings from Tim's home had been fired from the same 9mm gun used to kill Becky. However, Tim had refused to give Becky her 9mm gun, and investigators never discovered it when they searched his home. Prior to Becky's death, Tim claimed that he had not seen the weapon in months. The defense chose not to call witnesses when they were given the chance to do so. The jury pondered for 4 hours following the conclusion of the 6-day trial before finding the defendant guilty. Tim was consequently given a life sentence without the chance of release. Becky's family feels that Tim is right where he should be, despite his denial of guilt and his desire to appeal his conviction. Becky's family had the chance to hear impact statements at Tim's sentencing hearing. Using this as an opportunity, one of Becky's sisters informed Tim of the harm his activities were causing to his son's well-being. She made it clear that his sons were suffering as a result of the decisions he had made. Her sister promised to keep Becky alive in the hearts of her 3 sons even after she passed away.